Welcome back to the ETF Inspector. It's Monday, October 6th, a little after 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and this is our daily recap video for our 4 weekly paying Roundhill funds. The first 3 are covered call, 0DTE covered call strategies on the indexes, QDTE for the NASDAQ 100, XDTE for the S&P 500, and RDTE for the Russell 2000. The last is a Bitcoin covered call strategy, runs a little different than those, and it's YBTC, and they use IBIT as their underlying. Reminder, I'm on X at ETF_Inspector1. Post all things related to the videos I make and the ETFs that I cover. Today was announcement day for WPay, and where I don't fully cover them, I have talked about them sometimes on this channel. And they did announce 73.3904 cents per share, so that I'm sure the WPay people will be happy with another nice distribution. Specific to this video, though, I do post the 0DTE trades made each day, so that's what that right there is. Comes out. I got it out within less than 5 minutes of the information getting posted. So if you'd like to trade along with the pros, or if you just like to keep track of how your investment is doing, you've got that you can look towards if you're on X. All right, to start off, we'll look at how the market performed today. NASDAQ 100 up 0.78%. QDTE was able to keep right up with it. Everything's still kind of settling out, so I don't know that we're going to be able to call that a win yet. It is slightly higher, but sometimes there's a little bit of fluctuation afterwards, but up 0.8% in any case. Similarly, SPX, the S&P 500 was up 0.39%, XDTE up 0.38%. We just saw a slight shift in numbers right there. Russell 2000 was up 0.44%, RDTE only up 0.28%, so it's safe to say that that's an underperform, and it doesn't really make sense why, but we'll look at that in a minute. And finally, YBTC, the fund is based off of how IBIT performs. It was up 2.12%. YBTC only up 1.44%, so not able to keep up. All right, we'll start off looking at these funds for the 0-day trades that were made this morning. So I've got to adjust my screen. I can't see. I'm sitting outside my kids' practice waiting for them to come out, so the audio probably sounds a little funny. I'm sitting in the truck. So first off, QDTE sold 386 calls with a strike price of $25,050, collecting $8.98 per share, or $346,000. NDX closed under 25,000, 24,978. So that doesn't cost anything to close out at the end of the day, and they get to keep the full 346,000. Not a very large chunk compared to what they normally are collecting, but better than a loss. All right, when we take a look at the holdings. So this is the first video of the week. Last video was on Friday, so there were no changes to the holdings on Friday. We've got our deep in the money calls here in purple that we treat like almost running like a poor man's covered call, but this is definitely the expensive way to do it because they bought these real deep in the money, long dated, and then they sell calls off of them on a daily basis to generate income. So no change in those. We've got the rest of the money sitting in government funds and weekly T-bills. We're negative on the cash right now, so that one doesn't really matter. $957 million in assets under management, just over 27 million outstanding shares. At the start of the day, the NAV was $35.43. That's your net asset value. It's basically just how much money the fund is worth, the total collection divided by the amount of shares, and then today our share price increased, so that makes sense for the share price to be sitting close to 1%, not quite, 0.8% above that NAV. On Friday, if you missed the video, I made a payment guesstimate for this week of 20.5 cents. That declaration will come on Wednesday the 8th, so we're 2 days away from that. And the most recent distribution was 20.7181 cents that we all received this past Friday. And that was about a 30% annual yield. Next, we look at XDTE's trades. They sold 615 calls on the SPX with a strike price of $6,750, collecting $1.48 per share premium, or $91,000. SPX closed at 67.40, below the 67.50, so it doesn't cost anything to close it out, and they get to keep the full 91,000. Again, that's a pretty small number, but the problem is, right, obviously everything they're selling pretty far out compared to the previous close, and then they had to sell much higher than where things were starting, because everything in the market was starting, as you can see, real nice and high above the previous close line. So you're not going to be able to generate a ton of income without putting yourself at a high risk. When we flip over to the holdings page, again, no changes from that took place on Friday, no changes from last week. We've got all our deep in the money calls, all our government funds, T-bills, and cash. There's $413 million in assets under management. We did have people sell out of the fund on Friday, or thereabouts. They're not so fast at updating their information, but recently, we'll just say, the outstanding shares dropped by 70,000 down to 9,365,000. NAV at the start of the day was 44.17. Obviously, the underlying moved up, so the fund moved up in value. Share price closing around 44.34. I say around because these are automatic pulls through Excel, and sometimes they take a little bit of time to finalize. Their last payment on this past Friday was 17.1073 cents per share. That was only about a 20% annualized yield. That's a little lower than they've paid in recent history, other than the one right before it. And my guesstimate I made on Friday for this week was 18.5 cents. So we will find out on Wednesday the 8th how close that 18.5 cent guess is. Next, last of the three 0DTEs, we've got RDTE selling 681 calls on the Russell 2000 with a strike of 2,505. They collected $1.62 per share premium, or $110,000. Russell 2000 closed at 24.8635, well below the 25.05. Doesn't cost anything to close out, and they got to keep the full $110,000. Looks like I forgot to increase my size there. All right. Again, no changes in the holdings. We've got our deep in the money calls with our different expiration dates. Even though I don't talk about it, you can see here anywhere from December 19th of this year all the way to December 18th of next year. And this next to it is actually the strike price. These are flex options, so they're not what you're going to see when you open your normal option chain. There's $167 million in assets under management, just under 5 million outstanding shares. The NAV at the start of the day was 33.78. Share price increased throughout the day because the underlying increased, so they're closing around 33.93. Most recently, they made a ridiculous payment on Friday of 36.6052 cents per share. That came out to be 56% annual yield. That's way high compared to what they have been paying for a long time. So my guesstimate for this week, 26.5, but I mean, I'm kind of at their mercy if they decide to throw some crazy money out there. But we'll find out on Wednesday if 26.5 cents is right, or if it'll be closer to this most recent payment. Okay, and then finally, as far as YBTC, right, if you watched last week, they lost a lot of money on their weekly call that they sold. Ended up closing it out. It was, $20 to $30 million cost to close it out. But we start a new week, and so on Friday they rolled and sold calls for this week, this Friday the 10th, on IBIT with a strike price of 71.95. IBIT moved up pretty big, so it's already close. These calls are 0.93% out of the money. So everything on the holding side here is all based off before the market started. You have to wait until late night tonight before they put out the new download. So when everything started today, the synthetic was actually worth over 15 million. It will now be worth, a good bit more than that because the underlying increased by 2%. So the puts will be that much cheaper to close out, and the calls will have that much more value. We did see a large change here. The contracts dropped a decent amount, close to 10%. There were over 50,000 and 4,602 contract drop on the synthetic as well as the weekly sold call there. So I'm not sure if we're going to see that money get put into something else, because if people have been following me for a while, IBIT was not alone when I first started following this one. But since then, they sold out of the other underlying and have just been trading IBIT for maybe 2 months. But anyway, so the cost to close out these calls will have increased off of today's jump, but just understand that if they stay here, if they close here by the end of the week, they will end up worthless and be cheap to close out, but it's going to be a scary ride along the way. But it's a good kind of scary if everything's increasing in value. Our assets under management, 329 million on Friday. There was money coming into the fund, 40,000 new shares added to the outstanding shares, just under 7.5 million. NAV at the start of the day, $44.20. Obviously, everything increased today with the underlying going up, so the share price closing around $44.90. Tomorrow is declaration day. They declare on a Tuesday, X on Wednesday, and pay on Thursday. And my guesstimate for what the payment will be is 42.4389 cents per share. Most recently, though, last week they paid just under 40 cents, so I am estimating a higher payment than last. It's possible I'll be wrong, so we'll find out. And if you really can't wait, you can go on their website after 8 o'clock tonight, and they actually post it before they put the announcement out tomorrow. So that's everything I have for you. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.